What's up everybody, Jason from C&C Exotic Reptiles back at you with another video. This is going to be a really cool video because we're going to look at not only the litter from last week, which was just born, but also the litter number 2 of the year. We're going to talk about the successes and the failures because this one was not as good as the first. This is litter number 2, so unfortunately this is part of keeping, part of breeding, is that not every success is a success. So this was technically a success. Mom did everything she was supposed to do correctly. However, she gave me these little sweet potatoes, which are considered slugs or infertile eggs in the boa world. She did have 10 of them. I haven't rummaged through there, but the way she was looking, the way she was sitting this whole time, it just kind of told me that I was going to get some slugs. Now, as far as she's concerned, these are no different than babies to her. She is super defensive and she's ready to come and get me. So I'm going to be moving around a little bit to get out of her way. This is a super hypo T positive blood that is also part of my special lineage. This is what makes these guys super special, is that there's just some amazing stuff happening here. I do think it's a different line of T positive, a different line of blood, and also some incomplete dominant and potentially some polygenic traits going on in here. Now, she is a younger female. She was kind of borderline, do I want to try breeding her or not? It's not the fact that she was young, which is why she slugged. It's just the male who actually does that. So I do want to flip the camera and talk about why boas will slug out versus give healthy babies. So I'm going to get her cage all cleaned up, and let's take another look at some of last week's babies and talk about this special line that I have now renamed. Let's talk a little bit about why boas or snakes in general will slug out as opposed to give you fertile babies or fertile eggs. The primary reason is, in my experience, in what I've been doing, and this is not scientifically based, this is just what I have personally seen, what I've found, and what I think is happening, is that the male did not do the job. So the female got fertilized, she ovulated, she took her eggs full term or her babies full term, depending on species. However, they just didn't work out to be something that was fertile. So she did her job completely. A lot of people were saying, oh, my female slugged out, it's her fault, she continues to give me slugs. No, it's usually not the case. It's usually your male. The mother carried the baby full term. The mother ovulated. The mother fertilized the egg. Everything went perfectly on the mother's side. It was the male that actually was the issue, is that the male gave infertile sperm. Now that could be because it's a young male, because it's an old male, because the male was a little bit too warm. There's all kinds of reasons why your male could be slugging out. Primarily, you want to start with nice, healthy, really good size males that have the age and maturity to do the job. Now, there's always exceptions. Young males can do an excellent job. Older males can do an excellent job. But really, there's a peak performance period for these males, and as long as they're healthy, they're going to give you good babies. Then in that case, then you should have a healthy litter that's going to thrive and do really well for you. But it's typically not the female's fault. It's usually a problem with your male. Another issue that I see specifically with boas, because it takes a long time for boas to breed, but also you can put your male in too soon, or people will cycle their male through multiple females. Now that can work, but you do need to give your male sufficient rest, because if you do not, he's going to be burnt out, he's going to give unhealthy sperm, and it's just not going to work out for your females. So with all of that, you really, again, you need to make sure it's your male is in tip-top shape before breeding. That is just as important as your females. But if you cycle your male through multiple females, he'll get burnt out, and every female you put him to after the first is decreasing odds of getting a successful litter. Not always the case, but many times it can be. And males, in my opinion, I am more concerned about them during the breeding season, because they will breed themselves to death, they will go off food, they will just be in this constant roaming and breeding mode. So it's something to consider. Females can do that as well by being in this constant roaming mode, coming into breeding. All of my female snakes, all of my male snakes, they start to rub their noses unless I pair them. So that was the case with that early female. Again, she's younger, she's on the 3.5-year side, a little bit younger than I'd prefer. She is a dwarf boa, so that's why she's small like that, so size was perfect. But I did not want to just let her rub her whole face off. She was looking for males, she was looking to breed. I put them together, successful, she had good follicles. She carried her babies full term, which ended up to be slugs, but she was a great mom. She did her job. Next year, we'll see what happens. If she has some good weight on her, we'll try it again. Next thing I want to do is flip the camera and look at some of those babies from last week that we just looked at, or I guess it's 2 weeks now. All the babies have shed out. They look amazing, and I think this is going to be a really successful project in the future. And we also want to talk about the naming, because I have changed the name. Here it is, litter A, born 22623, hypo special cross hypo special. Let's take a look at what we have. All of the babies have shed out, and we have nice little piles. Look at those colors. Really, really cool colors, really cool patterns. There's a couple more up front here. We're going to take an in-depth, closer look as I start holding these guys. And lighting is not the best, so we'll see what we can do. This one's really standing out. It's almost this Inca-like patterning going on. There is no motley in here. So some people have said, oh, it could be motley. There is no motley because I've bred them together and they don't make supers. So there's definitely not a motley. When they do make a super, it is not a super motley. This one also really stood out as something really interesting. The pattern on that, the sides are just incredible. I am going to mount my camera on the tripod so we can take a closer look, but I noticed in my last video there were some blurry babies, and I did not want to do that, at least on this first look. I do also want to touch a little bit on the origins of this. So this was a project that I somewhat inherited or was gifted or given as a kind of teaming partner with Kevin McCurley from New England Reptile Distributors, who's a very good friend of mine. And he trusted some boas with me, and these were in some of that group of boas that he trusted to me. Not these specific ones. They were just kind of normal-looking, hypo-ish boas, but they were dwarfs and tiny little things, and I almost didn't take them at first. And he said, well, these come from a pretty special lineage or pretty special project specifically, and I said, all right, well, if you think they're worth getting, maybe I'll take them. So I'm going to pause the video here, flip the camera, and we'll take a closer look at some of these babies so I can explain the rest of the story. As I was saying, Kevin entrusted this group of boas with me, and I was successful in breeding them. So first year came out, some kind of weird stuff popped out. And this was not one of the first year's babies, but this is I want to say 2015 male. So just kind of looked really cool. So this was one of the original babies, had this really cool patterning. To me, they were just Central American-ish and Nicaraguan-ish kind of based, at least the initial babies. But there were a couple that had these funky-looking patterns, ranging from blocks to stripes to all kinds of stuff. For a little bit, I called it my stripe line. So we kept kind of breeding them, and I kept breeding, pairs of babies back to adults, and just weird stuff was popping out. Weird, funky-looking patterns. I kind of categorized them into blocks and stripes. So this is more of a blocky pattern with this really cool blushing on the sides. I'm going to get off camera and see if I can just get this thing to focus on this snake, because he's amazing looking. And the iridescence is just incredible. The sides are really strange. They kind of loses all the triangular medallions. And the patterns get these blocks with circles. Semi-Central American-like. It also has these chain-like patterns in it. So, kept breeding them. I'm probably 3 or 4 generations into breeding them now, and I've really still have no idea what's actually going on, if they're incomplete dominant, if they're recessive, if there is both going on. But in the process, I have found that there is a T-positive line that is not compatible with Burke or Nicaraguan T-positive. There is a bloodline that I am not sure if it's compatible. I'll find out this year because I've done some pairings. That litter that just slugged out, I was really hoping that one was going to prove, because it was going to give me a lot of answers specifically on the T-positive and blood, because that was both. And there could potentially be there are polygenic traits like pastels and things like that that make these really awesome. So to date, I've been calling them special. However, the whole story goes, which really I tried to back up with some genetic testing, and I'm still going to try to prove it. Regardless, it's a nice story right now, but it does line up with the time period. The story has it that these are actually boas from the Yucatan Peninsula. And that would make a lot of sense, because in the early 2000s, which was when Kevin from Nerd actually got these boas in from a wild-caught shipment, I believe, early 2000s, there were boas coming from all over the place, not specifically Yucatan. So that part doesn't necessarily add up. However, at the time, Yucatans were not worth anything. At the time, there was zero financial gain. Now today, Yucatan Peninsula boas would be worth some huge money. But again, back in the day, these were $25 boas. They were not expensive. There was no financial gain. There was no selling purpose. If anything, it was a flaw because people didn't want dwarf boas. They wanted the big, massive ones. So there was really no reason to lie about that, which is what kind of pulls a little bit of curiosity and truth into this story, potentially. Without the genetic testing, again, it is just a story. There is no paperwork. There is no lineage like that. It's just kind of, Kevin had these boas, he was breeding them, he was successful a couple times, there was some cool stuff, he sent some of these boas out on a breeding loan, and the guy he sent them to, I don't know whatever happened. I think they just kind of fizzled out, he had an issue with his collection and they ended up dying. But I was able to get this group of F1 babies that were able to then keep, and I bred them and bred them and bred them, and I've made babies, and I've basically held back everything from them except for a small handful of boas that I know who they've gone to, including some of my patrons who have now picked up a handful of these guys. So that's kind of, this is my special-ish line, and to date, because the story goes that they go back to the Yucatan Peninsula, and they have this super cool looking, I mentioned this Inca-ish pattern, Inca, Aztec, weirdish type of stuff, I am going to rename them, and this is a community decision between myself and Kevin, we are going to rename them the Mayan boa. So I know there is already a Mayan T positive. That is kind of cause a little confusion, but I'm okay with it because there is a line of T positive, and honestly, calling them special T positive or special blood or special in general, although I love the name because that's what I've been carrying through for years, it's causing too much confusion when I write these. People are asking, what is special? What is this? Is special a morph? Are you just labeling it special? So for that reason, we are now calling them Mayan boas. There are potentially a couple different patterns going on in here. There is potentially a Mayan T positive, which I will just have to rename Mayan Special T positive or Special Mayan T positive. There's potentially a Mayan blood, which is a blood boa that is Mayan. There is potentially a incomplete dominant patterns, potentially two of them, a block and a stripe, and then there is also some polygenic stuff going on in here. So more to come on all of that. Please follow with this stuff because I think it's really interesting, and hopefully you do too. I mean, look at the face on this guy. Let me see if I can get just the face to zoom in. It's just an incredible pattern, incredible head, just really, really wild looking stuff going on. So with all that said, I was going to take another look at those babies, but they are just all over the place right now, and I really want to get them situated, get their first males in them before we do that. So if you haven't liked this video yet, please like it, share it, subscribe to this channel, and consider joining my Patreon if you're looking for a community chat or if you want a little bit more one-on-one chats going on. Till next week, guys, I appreciate you watching, following, subscribing.